Hello and welcome to Ideagen TV. Today we have an incredible Global Leaders Power Panel led by Dr. Sidhant Gupta, the Director of Product Incubation at Microsoft. Dr. Gupta, welcome.
Hey, thank you, John. Thank you so much. Really excited for this panel. We have a really wonderful panel today. We have Camila from Google, and she also runs an amazing creativity consultancy. Pat, co-founder for Women of Color in Pharmacy. Welcome, Pat. Michele, ex-president of the Caterpillar Foundation. Welcome, Michele, and a great speaker. We'll talk about that in a second. And Cristina from UNICEF, who's directing the Impact Fund for Children. Welcome, everybody. So, my introductions cannot do justice. It was very long when I read about all of you. So I wanted to take a moment and quickly go around the room. And if you could each introduce yourself in a few words, let the audience know where you've been, where you are, where you're headed. That would be great. So let's start with you, Camila.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to be here with all of you. My name is Camila Kaul. I'm the founder and CEO of my own company called Just the Squiggle. It's an innovation consulting group dedicated to transform problems into possibilities through the power of creative thinking. I'm also the head of sales development and strategy at Google, and I've been working with innovation processes for the last 10, 15 years of my career. I'm super excited to be here and really talking about how innovation, creativity, and everything that we can hone as a team to come up with new and novel ideas can do to revolutionize the world that we're living right now and get us closer to our goals. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Pat, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ideagen, for the invitation. My name is Pat Cornet. I am diabetes genetic by background and training in research. I've been in pharma for over 20 years. I'm the co-founder of Women of Color in Pharma. It's an organization that's focused on women's development growth, both personally and professionally, founded about 5 years ago, going on 6 now. Our membership base is close to 500 members and over 5,000 in our global network. So we've been heavily focused in the last few years in building our global presence. And now I'm leading our work on the foundation side so that we can have an impact in the community where the women of color we serve live. So very happy to be part of this panel.
Awesome. Michele.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity and everyone's time. I'm the retired president of the Caterpillar Foundation and director of corporate social innovation. I retired from CAT after 30 years, but I continue the social impact work with the organizations and individuals to help them really maximize their investments in the not-for-profit space to help society around the world. And also I do inspirational, motivational speaking, and also continue to speak on how to make the biggest social impact. And I also am the author of Looking Up and also a TED speaker of Asking for Help is a Strength, Not a Weakness. So I'm really trying to innovate so that people think in a very philanthropic way because we all can make a difference in the world.
Thank you, Michele. And for our viewers, I highly recommend checking out Michele's TED Talk. I had an opportunity to watch that a couple of years back. I think it came out 3 years almost now. And I still remember one of the events you talked about on the airplane. That was awesome.
Hard to forget.
Glad to have you here. Cristina, you're up next.
Yes, well, thank you for having me, and I'm honored to be here with all these incredible co-panelists. So I'm Cristina Shapiro. I'm the president of the Impact Fund for Children. It is an impact investing fund that supports UNICEF. So my job is to raise impact investing capital and create financial solutions that can help UNICEF achieve its mission. I've been in this role closing in on a year, so started during the pandemic, and couldn't be prouder to join an organization like UNICEF that is now at the forefront of helping so many countries around the world receive the COVID vaccine while continuing other life-saving immunization work. And prior to that, had been at Goldman Sachs for 9.5 years, leading key impact initiatives such as 10,000 small businesses and 10,000 women. And I'm originally from Mexico, and we'll hand it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Cristina. Really looking forward to learning more about that impact investing. So, Pat, let's start with you. You've been really a force in the organization, which is the Women in Color in Pharmacy. And looking back at 2020, which was kind of a hot mess, I was thinking pharmacy had all the eyeballs on it because, there was the vaccine development, and that was essentially humanity's only hope of getting out of this pandemic is for pharmacy to come through and essentially pharmaceuticals to come through and save us. So talk to me a little bit about did you see any changes in the leadership principles in what happened? Was it a tough year or was it business as usual? We just didn't know. Kind of how was year 2020 and coming out of it? Did you observe any interesting leadership or changes or none?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that question. I think for all of us, the year was quite challenging, right? Both socially and personally, on a political level and on a health level, right? There was so much happening last year and continues into this year. The pharmaceutical industry, I think, is at a position where, from a reputation standpoint, it's really turned a corner. A lot of the work we do to deliver and bring effective medicines to society often was shadowed in more of a negative light. And I think with the COVID vaccine work that happened, public-private partnership across government as well as the industry really put us in a position to do well for our society. And I'm proud to be part of an organization that is delivering on that and supporting that. To your question around leadership, yes, absolutely. I think this was a test of times, right? When you look at leaders now, you really had to think about how are you going to flex your muscles differently to pivot during this time. And what's really stuck out for me, I don't know that this is really exclusive to pharma, but the resilience, the focus on empathy, courage that it really took to be a bit vulnerable as a leader right now and connect personally with your community of people you're driving, leading, as well as professionally. We really saw an intersection happen between the two, and I don't know that we're going to be able to return from that. So in the industry, certainly leaders are very, very laser focused on continuing to deliver the work we do. We're bringing critical medicines to the forefront, but also making sure that everybody is thriving well, that it's being done in a way that's mindful of what's happening in our environment. And innovation was touched on earlier. How can we be innovative during this time, which you saw with the acceleration of the vaccine development? How does that innovation stick? And what are leaders going to glean from this moment that we can carry forward into how we do drug development in the future?
Yeah, that's very interesting. You mentioned back something, leadership and how this made the leaders vulnerable. It kind of exposed that vulnerability, which really reminds me of, I don't know how many of you have seen the Brené Brown's kind of leadership principles, and she talks about vulnerability being very important characteristic in leadership. So Pat, can you touch upon a little bit of what you meant by vulnerability, especially when it comes to pharma? What did you see specifically?
Yeah, I think you saw a lot more discussion around how COVID, the pandemic, was affecting leaders personally. I mean, talking about how it was affecting their families, how it was affecting extended family, and how it was affecting the community of the organization, and really looking at the organization as a community. So I think it's a little different, right? You have to be a bit more vulnerable, comfortable to talk about your emotions, talk about your anxiety, talk about what's keeping you up at night. That's not just work. It's what's happening in our complete environment. And I think creating a dialogue that really opened it up and made others comfortable to be able to speak about what was making them anxious and keeping them up at night. And let's not forget, it's not just the pandemic. I shouldn't say just, the pandemic is significant, but it's also the social unrest that we experience in the United States and other parts of the world that really tested how we work together as a community, how we touch each other in Black and Brown communities, and surfaced hard issues that we still face as a society when it comes to people of color. So all of those are points of vulnerability that aren't so comfortable to talk about. And I think we saw leaders really stand up to create an environment where it was more acceptable to have those conversations.
That's fascinating. Cristina, on similar lines, I was thinking about, when I was reading your bio, impact investing and managing the impact fund for children. I feel like if anything got left behind in all of the 2020 pandemic were children, which in a good way, because they weren't really impacted, thank God. As father of 2 little children, that's
not
great.
Not directly, but significantly in an indirect way.
And I wanted to understand, with all of the world, paying its attention to broken logistics, broken supply chain, a lot of things happened. Kind of what did you see? What happened? Did it change a lot of leadership for what you had to do? Did you have to step up your game? Or it was business as usual? Like, I'm really curious to understand, how did it go? And I feel like people forgot about this stuff a little bit, especially children around the world.
Yeah. So again, I entered this role when the pandemic had started. I never actually got to step in the office. And so I don't know what it was like at UNICEF before, but I think UNICEF, I don't want to say it's business as usual, because this pandemic is anything but usual, but UNICEF is used to responding to emergencies and crises all over the world and focusing on the most vulnerable. And so in many ways, UNICEF was positioned to be able to respond. And it's the reason that UNICEF was selected by the Global Vaccine Alliance to lead on the COVID-19 vaccine distribution for 92 of the low and moderate income countries. And I can talk about that later. But I think what I saw when I entered UNICEF USA, which is the partner for UNICEF in the United States, helping UNICEF fulfill its mission, was that we had to pivot ourselves, right? So how our teams worked and where they, everybody worked at home and our business didn't stop. It became ever so important. And we focused immediately on what could we do that is different or needed at the moment. And I'll talk about, when I first joined, one of the key issues that UNICEF was facing was it is responsible for getting critical health supplies to so many people through low-income governments, through governments in low-income countries. But it itself was facing challenges in even procuring basic things like personal protective equipment. And so the reason for that is that the financial markets were destabilized, right? So suppliers who typically might have delivered supplies without requiring some type of prepayment were no longer able to do so. They needed some cash up front so they could start to reserve, the supply for that particular party. And UNICEF needed us to create, almost on the spot, a guarantee fund so that we could reduce their risk as they were committing to purchase supplies for PPE on behalf of certain suppliers, and we're sending money to those suppliers before the supplies had arrived. So I think what we did was what we do best, what UNICEF does best, is it pivoted on the moment, it realized what was needed. And in particular for the Impact Fund was we created this guarantee fund called the FAST Fund that provided that just-in-time guarantee support for UNICEF. And we're really proud that it won us a recent inclusion in the Fast Company's Most Innovative Companies list for that launch. So again, I think in many ways, to reiterate, UNICEF is used to responding, but I think even with that, we had to pivot. Again, just like UNICEF delivers vaccinations and immunizations to half of the world's children, but 80% of those campaigns had to be put on hold. And then UNICEF had to focus on how do we get those started again, and ensure that in spite of COVID, we don't lose the progress that had been made.
So are we now back? So I want to hear some good news. Maybe are we back with those programs? Are you all back on your feet running those programs?
Yes, but not yet where we would need to. So let me give you some examples. So with vaccinations, 39 million children received their catch-up vaccinations last year, but there are 80 million children who are still at risk from missing vaccinations unless we can address critical things, right? So PPE was the start, but UNICEF is also working on providing cold chain equipment so that those vaccinations can be distributed safely and delivered. So PPE was a start. If you don't have health workers with PPE, you can't convene people in vaccination sites. So that was the first thing. And as an example, UNICEF distributed over 170 million gloves and over 218 million surgical masks to support those efforts. So we're not entirely back to where we need to be, but we're making efforts. Other areas of progress are 300 million children received services to prevent malnutrition. However, there's an incremental 6.7 million children beyond those who are already at risk, who are at risk of malnutrition, and that has been aggravated because of COVID. So some good news and hope, absolutely, but still not where we were before the pandemic.
Well, all right, good luck to UNICEF, and hopefully under your leadership, we can get it back. Thank you, Cristina, for that work. Michele, I wanted to talk about a little bit of the work you did during your role as president of the Caterpillar Foundation. So here at Ideagen, one of the big ideas is we bring folks together from different sectors and we try and see how we can cross-fit solutions across sectors. And we've heard Cristina and Pat kind of how some of the leadership had to step up during this pandemic. But I feel like those basic tenets of good leadership remain the same through time. What the pandemic did was it accelerated and you had to step up or perish. So Michele, can you share any story, any event from your time as president of Caterpillar where you had to work across boundaries, whether those boundaries were nations, sectors, and kind of where you saw that nugget of leadership and you had to step up? Can you share something with us?
Sure, thank you so much. The previous two ladies really gave some great examples of you really have to think on your feet during these times. And another time that you have to do that is during a natural disaster. And when there are natural disasters, and they seem to be more frequent these days, Caterpillar plays a role in that, because whether it's a tsunami or an earthquake or some other natural disaster, you have to really have the machinery and expertise to be able to go into a region and help clean up and just move debris, etc., just so that you can get the Red Cross and other people who need to get in there to help. And we have to coordinate with the governments also, so that our dealers can tell us what they need, and we can, whoever in the network, we can get the right machinery and the folks that also know how to operate it. So when you think about anything that happens in life that's very large, whether it's a disaster or COVID, you really takes three sectors to bring it to fruition. And what I mean by that is you need the government to help clear the way. You need the private sector to come in and do what they do best. And you need the cost sector to come in and do what they do best and serve the people on the ground that are suffering. So I call it the three-legged stool. And we do that a lot with Caterpillar as a company and also with the foundation. An example that I can give for the foundation, we did our first public-private partnership with the State Department. And we worked with the State Department and a not-for-profit so that we could help fund and participate in the first Women's Entrepreneur Center in Zambia. And it would have never happened without the not-for-profit or the State Department. We couldn't have done it by ourselves because it took everybody to use their expertise to bring to the table and really make it a success. So we were hoping for about 500 entrepreneurs that came to the center, and it was in Lusaka. And in Lusaka, it's dirt roads, etc. And the nonprofit had set up, a whole entrepreneur center complete with laptops, expertise, and everything the women would need. And so we're hoping for about 500 in the first month. And lo and behold, 2,000 women were working through the process in the first month. And we were there when the first women came in, and it's really fun to see that all the way in Zambia, the women are thinking just like the women in the United States. They have their business plan. They know what they need. One of the biggest issues is capital, just like here. And it was fun to watch because they had the people they needed to help the women get what they need and also help them plan their strategy, etc. And it really took the three-legged stool to make it work. And to this day, roughly 4 to 5 years later, it's still going strong. And the women entrepreneurs are phenomenally successful, which is no surprise. Women often and, very often are very successful at what they do. And they need help just like other entrepreneurs. And so that center is giving them what they need. But if you look at these times that we're in today, as Pat talked about the pharmaceutical and also about how do we get vaccines to the children, that's also the three-legged stool. Right there was 2 examples. And it also takes the government then to distribute the vaccines both here and also to the children. So the three-legged stool works all the time. We just don't see it like that. And I think that's one of the issues we have is if we really talked about how we all have our specialty and can pull together, I think that people would recognize, that working together really is the way to go.
That's wonderful. And I really love the dotted line you drew from the pandemic, or rather solid line, to natural disasters and how leadership that you demonstrate is similar. And I think what I'm hearing, and we'll switch to Camila for a little bit more insight, but at least what I heard was, leadership is preemptive crisis management, and you're always doing crisis management without making it seem like there's a crisis. So Camila, I've been really following all the work you're doing in unlocking creativity and with your background in neuroscience. And a leader yourself, I'm sure maybe part of what you've done over the last year is maybe looked at some of the leadership examples. Could you share kind of, if any traits you've observed, any insights for us, something to share with our audience on what leadership meant from your eyes?
100%. I think now more than ever, leadership has been redefined. And if you think about it, we've seen in 8 months, we've seen 10 years of change in 8 months. We have no precedent from this. This is something that we're going into uncharted territory. How do we navigate a 2021 with so much uncertainty? So I think this is the moment in which leadership has been tested. And I've seen many, many global leaders, big, small, from many different angles, step up to the challenge we have. And I've seen 3 major, let's call it traits, that I think has been the motor behind great leadership, especially right now. The first one is, a great leader I've seen is it's focusing not only on themselves, but also on developing others, thinking about a challenge as an opportunity for growth. If anything, this pandemic and everything that we've seen in the last year has given us an opportunity to learn from others, has given us an opportunity to develop our skills. And that leader that is taking this opportunity to develop their teams, to develop others, to help them thrive in uncertainty is the one that I'm seeing it's having more impact, and it's taking an opportunity and a crisis like we have as an opportunity versus something negative. They're seeing the positive on it and developing their teams and their folks through this process. The second one is definitely encouraging strategic thinking, which is absolutely necessary right now. What's our vision? What's our focus? But also giving space for innovation. And what does that look like? Means giving space and time for your teams to really think about what's next. What am I going to do now? How am I going to pivot? Really thinking about that secret superpower that we all have, which is creative thinking, and applying it to dream about a better future, a better tomorrow, a different choice, a different strategy, a different angle. And more important than that is not only about giving the space to be creative and think about innovation, but it's also giving a plan for action. How do we put that into action? How do we make it that it's creating value? So it's that moment of combining strategic thinking and very specific type of focus with the space and the plan to provoke your brain and our diversity of thought to come up with ideas, because we're going into uncharted territory. We have no idea where we're heading. There's no precedent. So what we've been doing in the past, it's not necessarily what's going to work on the future. And then finally, the ability to inspire and lead by example. If anything has this year has brought us is really complicated moments in which leaders have stepped up and say, you know what, I'm going to show the way, but I'm going to lead by example. I'm not only going to be telling you what to do, I'm going to actually do it. And that has been an incredible thing to see how people and leaders are stepping up, showing the way, doing the work, leading by example. So I would say as leaders, those are three traits that I believe the pandemic and everything that has happened in the last year, not only the pandemic, but the social injustice that we've seen, many other things that have come to light, has provided us also the opportunity to step up and make this world a better place, make our teams better, and help us thrive into a future that is incredibly unknown.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Actually, leading by example, the first example that came to my mind was all this working from home situation we each find ourselves in, right? One of the best, I don't know, I think it was New York Times or somewhere I was reading, a whole lot of companies were like, oh no, we cannot work from home because if I don't show up to work, work doesn't get done. And when kind of leaders like CEOs, trillion-dollar companies started working from home, and there was no change in the output of the company, I was like, this is amazing. Like, if they can do it, I'm sure all of the middle managers complaining that we have to show to work because no one works had to step up, learn a new skill, and learn to manage those teams. So that's an excellent example, Camila. Another thing you touched upon, Camila, was that this pandemic has changed something forever, which is now everybody is thinking a little bit strategic, a little bit long term. And that makes me think 2021, kind of what is the new normal? I keep hearing that this is the new normal because now we're thinking about that this is going to stay with us. Maybe variants of this virus might stick with us, etc. So, Cristina, I want to switch to you and think about and get your thoughts about, is there a new normal for UNICEF now? And one example, just to naively seed, I was thinking, should UNICEF now get in the business of securing its supply chain? Because clearly that's kind of what held you back from delivering vaccines, which were in no shortage, to children. So kind of what's the new normal for UNICEF and yourself and your organization?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, there's a new normal in terms of how we work. And I think Camila started to get into that, which is just the reality that we can work from wherever we want, and output can still happen. But with regards to UNICEF, I think, it does secure a lot of its supply chain. I mean, it does have advanced market commitments and agreements with massive suppliers and pharma companies. To be very candid, I think what held them back from the immunization was just much more the fear of infection and how to implement these vaccination or immunization campaigns safely in environments where you had shortages of PPE, fear amongst populations that if they would go out, would they get infected at a point in time where there yet wasn't a COVID vaccine. And the need to properly train healthcare workers on that protocol and ensure, candidly, in a lot of the places that UNICEF works, even ensuring that there was access to clean water for safe hand washing was the priority. So I think in many ways, what UNICEF did now is very much in line with its expertise and what it does. I mean, I think some of the new normals are, and I think some of the panelists, it's this partnership and innovation, really thinking about how do we partner with organizations differently to achieve, if you think about UNICEF's role of getting 2 billion doses to 92 countries all in 2021 to vaccinate the 20% of the populations in those countries, that's the new normal there is taking the model that UNICEF already has of working really closely with governments and with NGOs in those countries to a new level, right? Just the level of trust and efficiency that has to be there is monumental. My hope to maybe coming at it from a financing perspective is that in a new normal, we could really think more about how to create innovative financing mechanisms that ensure that organizations like UNICEF have the funds that they need when they need it, right? So UNICEF has to fundraise billions of dollars every year to be able to procure these vaccines and distribute them. We really need to think about how do we enable UNICEF to finance itself in a different way that is more scalable and more immediate when these emergencies happen, right? So right now, there's, I think, a $2 billion campaign to raise grants in support of UNICEF's response. But if we had that $2 billion today, we could accelerate that impact even if the fundraising happens later. So I think a new normal, again, is bringing that preemptive crisis management, really bringing it to financing so that organizations that are doing such important work are not held back because of money-related issues. So that's one area that I certainly am focused on with the Impact Fund, and that I hope others will focus on as well. Over.
Yeah, wonderful. Pat and Michele, any new normal commentary where you see what the new normal might be? Michele, you want to take that first?
Sure. You know, as I work with NGOs and companies and individuals, everybody's asking that question, and there is no playbook, as Cristina said, and you know, we are still flying by the seat of our pants because while there's certainly a light at the end of the tunnel and we're feeling more positive today, we really don't know when we're going to, well, first of all, we don't even know what the new normal is, do we? Does that mean you don't have to wear a mask, or what do we consider normal now? And so individuals and not-for-profits and some companies that I'm working with are really more looking at how do they still deliver their 2020 plans and forward with what we have today, because at any time a variant could come up and really stop us in the tracks. And I think people are starting to realize that we still could get stopped. And so you mentioned the supply chain. I think that not only applies to the NGOs, I definitely think it applies to companies as well. If you look at the ports, a lot of things are not getting through right now. And, you know, if you even order furniture or something, the lag times are extremely long in almost every category that you try to order. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And companies are trying to deliver to their customers, et cetera. So I think a lot of 2021 is going to be spent, it seems, as people talk, is, you know, what is our new normal? And in the meantime, we have to keep innovating. You know, a lot of good things came out of COVID. You know, earlier it was mentioned that innovation has leapfrogged, you know, probably a decade at least, and it's going to continue to do that. It also made people a lot more empathetic, and companies are realizing that, you know, when people are allowed back into work, a lot of employees don't want to come back to work in the office. A lot of surveys are being done. So that's on the mind of some employers that I've been working with as well, is what do we do with the mindset once we are allowed back into the office? So the people part is also on everyone's mind as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's true, and thanks for asking the right question. Is do we even know what the new normal is? Pat, have you noticed anything in the pharma? I know you. I mean, I don't think there's a new normal for pharma, and
yeah,
pharma for really stepping up on the innovation front. Personally, as someone from science background, I was really impressed with the RNA work with the first vaccine. That was still nearly science fiction that will do it, and it happened in 2020. So that was amazing innovation coming out of pharma.
Yeah, and I think that I agree with comments said earlier that you know, what is the new normal? We're all still trying to figure that out, that there is no playbook for this, and the playbooks we thought we had probably didn't work. They didn't hold up. So we're re-looking at those playbooks. I do think it has fast-forwarded innovation that was already taking place from a scientific standpoint and a partnership and collaboration standpoint. What I've heard in the healthcare sector with the HCPs that we work with is that it's probably leapfrog things at least 5 years, especially around telehealth and being able to see more openness around working with patients through virtual means, virtual channels, and all of that. That's really changed the landscape for pharma, and that's going to continue to change the landscape for how we engage with our healthcare partners across the board. And from a scientific standpoint, you're right, Project Warp Speed and other collaborations that have been happening, I think they will continue. We'll continue to see that because we're not out of the woods yet. We really aren't with the variants that are surfacing. I think from a WOSIP standpoint, what we've seen is the enormous investment in addressing health equity, addressing underserved population needs, and inclusive research. There's always been a focus there, but the amount of focus and attention because of COVID really showing the global disparities that continue to exist has really changed things dramatically. So we are partnering with different leaders across pharma to really think through, well, what does that then mean in terms of action that can be taken? A lot of funds being raised, commitments from companies we're seeing across the board, BMS, J&J, and others. But what does that mean in action, and how do we take this moment and actually then drive change in the communities that need it the most? And how do we partner with those communities to figure out the best way to actually drive that change? So that's resulted in 2 programs for us at WOSIP. As we saw the pandemic highlight health disparities across the globe, we really wanted to do more. And we evolved our strategic focus, leveraging our platform with around 2 programs. So We Are Pharma is one of the programs that we've launched. It's a pilot to develop speakers, women of color speakers in industry who will have conversations with community leaders on drug development. And this is tackling the historic biases in research practice that we've seen through the Tuskegee experiments, Henrietta Lacks non-consent issue that has really sort of plagued our community with the belief that research is not for us, right? So that is one program that we're getting off the ground. The first event will be on March 17th. And then our think tank, which is where we're bringing together leaders who are sitting in the C-suite to have conversations with women of color and the trade association level leaders to really address issues around health equity, inclusive research, and care mobility. And I would say that I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our Global Leadership Program, which is 2 years in the making now. We started out with a 6-month pilot, really focused on evolving women's careers, professional skills, and increasing their capacity as leaders in their organizations. And now we are back in 2021. In the midst of all of this happening, we felt it was important to continue that program and prepare potentially even more women of color for leadership roles in their companies. So that's 45 women now that are involved with the program for 1 year. Very, very happy to see that continue change. So I'm very optimistic about the future, but I agree we still have some work to do to figure out what it's going to look like. There's just a lot of uncertainty right now until we have sort of the vaccine and things of that nature under control and more people immunized.
Sidhant, can I add a point about leadership? In pharma, they really have been shining more than ever, and my hats off to them. Leadership during this time especially, and in any crisis, is we're managing risk. And pharma took a big risk with the vaccine creation using the RNMA, I think it's called. Correct me if I'm wrong, Pat.
Yep.
And this was a perfect opportunity for them to try it. And not only did it work for this COVID virus that we have, but now that it's been proven, Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, it's going to be able to be used in the future for other challenges that we have, and we're going to be able to react quicker now that we have this technology perfected. And so managing all this risk in a company, can you get your supply chain? Where are your employees? What if the stock market crashed? I mean, there was a lot that could have gone wrong that didn't go wrong, and people didn't panic, and we came together as one. But pharma in particular really has been managing the risk of all of this more than I think people could ever imagine. And I really, my hats off to them.
Yeah, the RNA messenger platform now developed, I'm certain, we'll see a lot more in the coming future. Camila, you seeded this new normal in our head. It's making me think, how has creativity evolved or gone down? Or I am hopeful that it will evolve, especially when really creative teams aren't working together. What are your thoughts on it? What will happen, what will change, or we don't know, and you're still figuring it out?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It has definitely accelerated the importance and the awareness that creativity is not just a nice to have. Creative thinking is a must. It's an engine of innovation. It's an engine of growth. So no wonder why the World Economic Forum actually states that creativity is the single most important skill for business and for professionals today to master, because it's an engine of growth. So if anything, the pandemic and everything that we've seen has accelerated the importance of utilizing creative thinking, innovation techniques to think thoughts you've never thought before, to really recreate what the world will look like in the future. So that's the number one. And then the second thing is everything that we've been exposed to, like, for example, working from home, Zoom meetings, all of these collaboration tools have also provided us the technology and the tools to expedite collaboration, which in the past we've collaborated in many ways, and we've always done it as a society. That's the way that we've been able to sustain life. But now, under the circumstances that we're living and the tools and technology that we have at our disposal, then collaboration has become more richer. Then, therefore, ideas have become a currency. It has become a fluidity. And that's incredibly important if we think and if we want to get to the goals that we were thinking for 2030, or just get to the next year. Yeah. So I think this evolution of creative thinking has been absolutely critical, and it has been an amazing process to see how many pieces have come together and collided in a moment in time that will propel us for the future. So I would say, if anything, it has become a much more important secret superpower that we were maybe not ignoring, but not so aware of. And now it's obvious, and it's there for staying.
Well, one of my favorite outcomes of this new normal and creativity is I don't have to stand outside conference rooms waiting for it to empty. So we can go and chit chat for 15 minutes. It's been incredibly efficient to do these video meetings. I do miss some of the chit chatting and the hallway conversations, and that's where my question about creativity came in. Is I do miss that. Like, some of the amazing ideas we had were having a conversation that wasn't work related or project related. So I'm really looking forward to how we bring back some of that hallway conversation creativity back into new normal.
We also need that personally. We need that personally as well, don't we?
Yes.
Indeed.
We need human connection.
Yes, we need it. I miss hugging. I miss everything. And in work, as much as we hate to admit it, you get excited to go to work because you get to talk about other things. Have adult conversation.
Indeed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a large part of our audience here is emerging leaders. Our youth, young girls and women who look up to women like all four of you. And I wanted to take a moment to go around the room and do one small exercise, which is one, what leadership advice, principle, tenet would you want to share with the young folks looking up to you? And second, can you share one key learning that you've learned all through your career in leadership up until now that has the potential to change the world? So those two, let's start with you, Cristina, and we'll go around the room.
Okay, so the advice that I would give, and I'm going to say two, but they're related, is that I think I would encourage our young leaders to find as many mentors as they can, but I want to challenge them because I think I had a mistaken sense of what mentorship was early on in my career. I felt like when you were matched with a mentor, that was your mentor for life. And so then choosing the mentor and making the right match became such a high stakes exercise. And one of the things I realized in my last career at Goldman was, in fact, your goal should be to have as many mentors at any point in your career, and they can be point in time. A mentor could be somebody that helps connect you to the right person. It could be somebody who gives you that just-in-time feedback for your presentation. It could be somebody who you go to for career advice, and those may be three completely different people, and maybe you never speak to them again, and maybe they become part of what my second piece of advice, which is as you engage with these multitude of mentors over time that are going to serve different purposes, I would encourage everyone to start to create what I would call their personal board of directors. And this is the very small group of people, maybe 3 to 5 people who are your go-to people for advice, for support, for connections, who care about you and your brand and your success, and who can advise you and will always pick up the phone when you call. And so I think you need both. You need the point in time mentors, those who might just help you for a minute, and then that board of directors that are just the people who are in charge of your personal success. And they can be family and friends and colleagues, and there's no limit to who they could be. And then to your second question, I think it was a lesson that I've learned, and I don't know, I feel like I should borrow from Michele and say everybody should always look for a 3-legged stool, because that's a secret for success. But I really think that it is, in my mind, that we all have a responsibility to achieve impact on what I consider a one-to-one basis and a one-to-many. So often we minimize the impact we can have on a single interaction with a person, helping a single individual out in any given day. We think, no, we have to really hold out for the bigger impact, but they're equally as important. What you do to help an individual, where you have the power to help or the resources to help, to me is just as important as then putting on our hat as leaders and saying, how are we going to then do this at a larger scale? And I do think, not in jest, but Michele's example of a 3-legged stool is really the way to do that. Partnership is that way to achieve that impact on a one-to-many basis, where 1 + 1 + 1 is always going to be more than 3. So let me stop there, and I'm eager to hear what my co-panelists have to say.
That is such wonderful advice, Cristina. I would argue that a leader cannot be a great impact leader one-to-many if you cannot have one-to-one impact. I mean, you have to be empathetic and a good person in a single one-to-one situation to be able to have an impact. So that's wonderful advice. Thank you so much. Michele, what would be your 2 things? 1, advice for the emerging leaders, and 2nd, a key lesson from your life.
Yeah, thank you. Cristina, you hit it. I call it the kitchen table in my book. I surround myself by my kitchen table of people I go to. And my advice to the young people today, or any leader, is to get as much experience as you can as you're growing. And definitely travel, because as you travel the world and see the different experiences and what people are experiencing and how they live, it really impacts you personally. And when you think about leadership, it's less about imparting something great to others, and it's more about extracting something great from them. And it's usually something that already exists, but they may not even know it's there. You're not going to be the smartest person. You should surround yourself by people who think differently than you. I always told my teams, if we all think alike, then I don't have the right team. And you surround yourself by people who are very different than you, have different life experiences, and all the other types of diverse thinking and experiences. And, I always thought about the world leaders in your second question. The greatest leaders in history didn't judge their people by just a cover. When you think of Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, Rosa Parks, and others, they didn't get their accomplishments because they were good at judging character. They changed the world because they saw beyond stereotypes and snap judgments to the astounding value that we all have. Everybody has value, and don't ever forget that. And they were actually great at judging the possibility and seeing the possibility in everyone. And I've seen that. And I worked with folks who helped me get to the level I was at. And by level, I don't mean how high, but me personally as a person and as a leader. And so you fight for everybody, not just the ones that you see maybe has the potential that you only see. And remember to value everyone and make sure you surround yourself by those folks, because you never know who's going to have the next bright idea.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you, Michele. Pat?
Wow, tough act to follow. I around the advice for the next generation leaders, I would say don't let fear of failure hold you back. I know it has in my career, and I've had to learn to embrace failure because you learn so much and get so much growth from it. So those moments where you think, oh my God, I have to take the most cautious route because it's safer. Sometimes the route that you go that might, have the highest risk has the greatest benefit and growth for you. I've got to get one more in there around, and I always share this with my daughters, around being self-aware of your gifts. And your gifts may not look like others, and they will evolve as you grow as a human being, right? And cultivate those gifts, build on those gifts. I think we spend a lot of time, maybe too much time, I know I did, trying to fix myself and fit into another mold that really was not for me, and that's okay, because what we saw, especially last year, is that all of these gifts can be valued, and it's the collaboration across and the gifts coming together across different people that really bring the most value at the end of the day. So don't try to fit into that mold. Around your second point, I agree with the comments made before. I think from my vantage point, increasing our capacity for empathy is really could be a game changer for us as a society and as leaders who have the helm to be able to have that influence. I think it's tremendous. It's a tremendous time that we've seen it show up as a critical trait for leaders. And I hope to see that continue. I really think there's great power in it. And it's power through being empathetic, to be open to collaborate and accelerate. It just transcends so many areas that I really think empathy is a key changer for us moving forward.
Awesome. So empathy and identifying and nurturing your gifts, even though they may not look like others. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Camila, do you want to share the 2 things with us, and for the youth leaders, emerging leaders, and then in your leadership, 1 key learning?
Absolutely. So for the emerging leaders, I would say my major advice is together we do more. There's no glory in doing things by yourself. The collective we is what makes the world grow, is what makes the world go. So your success is my success. If we really think about honing that and lifting while we climb, is exactly what's going to get us through. So I would say just really think about the power of us together. Really think about how together we achieve more. And that's what team is. And what I know that it might look like a cliche, but that is exactly the principle behind a team. Together we achieve more. And as leaders, as we climb up and as we get more influence and more of a platform, lift people up. And it doesn't have to be in terms of a hierarchy, is the person that is next to you. If you can do something to lift that person up and you help them grow, you're going to be growing as well. So really think about the power of all of us working together. And then for the second question around my major learning, I would say I live and die by this. And I say, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And bet on yourself. It doesn't, as Pat was mentioning, your gifts are unique to the world. So the more that you can be curious about that and be bold about it, you can make a very big difference. You can make a change. And it's not about perfection. It's about progress. So really thinking about where do you start? What do you bring to the table? And bet on yourself. Just be very proud of what you bring and really hone everything you have so you can make a difference for others. So that's the two things that I will leave you with.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That was really inspirational. We are almost on time. I wanted to thank each one of you for sharing your insights, your global leadership experience, and then especially in the end, sharing a key message with some of our emerging leaders. Thank you so much for being on Ideagen. We wish you all the best, and let's go find out what the new normal is and go get it.
Let's do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much, Dr. Gupta.